Courtney Cox here with Nick Goss, and it's time to talk March Madness. It's time to talk the NCAA tournament, and in this case, it's time to talk about the ACC. 9 teams coming into this March, and they've got 1 left heading into the Sweet 16. So that's kind of crazy. 8 teams losing in the first 2 rounds. Wake Forest was a play-in game, so I guess you could consider it 3 rounds. But all in all, a lot of people are talking about the ACC being overrated when it comes into March. What's your initial thoughts on that?
I think the conference is definitely overrated to a degree. I mean, when you have a lot of the best teams in the country, I mean, they have the deepest conference, the best collection of good teams. The expectations are always going to be so high, and it's really hard to meet them because the March Madness is such a different animal. The games are a lot more physical. I think overall the ACC is a bit of a finesse conference. I thought we saw some ACC teams, including Duke against South Carolina, really get bullied in the paint.
But you look at their out-of-conference schedules, and for example, Duke beat Michigan State and Florida. Obviously, they won the ACC tournament. So besides the ACC, they did have some serious wins outside of conference. You look at FSU, they beat Minnesota, Florida. They also beat Duke and Virginia Tech in conference. So when you're matching up against such great teams, I think it helps the case that they're not as overrated as some people say that they are. I mean, yes, the ACC has had some problems when it comes to the tournament, getting booted out in the first round, the second round. But I think overall, for me at least, I wouldn't call them overrated. I would just call them getting upset in March.
It's not like they're just playing their own conference teams and scheduling cupcake opponents in the early part of the season. Like, they have the ACC Big Ten Challenge. They play teams like Kentucky, Florida, Kansas. I mean, it's not like they were challenging themselves outside of their conference.
Well, even you look at Louisville, they beat Purdue and Kentucky. We were talking about this earlier. Obviously, Louisville-Kentucky is a rivalry game, but that's a huge win for the Cardinals.
Right.
That's a huge win for Rick Pitino. And Kentucky's still in this thing. So say Kentucky wins the national championship. I mean, they've got a road to go down still to get there, but you can't look at Louisville and then call them overrated when they beat the eventual national champion. So I think looking at the overall schedule, especially looking at out of conference, definitely, yes, maybe they're overrated when you look at the amount of teams going into the NCAA tournament, but I wouldn't call the conference overrated.
Yeah, I think you look at one team in particular, and I think a lot of people are really surprised that Duke lost at this stage. I mean, they won the ACC tournament. They're getting hot at the right time. They have some fantastic players. Jason Tatum is probably going to be a top 5 pick in this upcoming NBA draft. But they had flaws all season that a lot of people just kind of ignored because they were playing so well at the end of the season. I mean, they didn't have a true point guard. The Grayson Allen thing was a distraction. They were poor defensively for a lot of the season. A lack of team chemistry. They have a lot of freshmen, a lot of one-and-done players. It's hard to gel guys like that.
Having surgery.
Yes, and that was part of it. And they just had a very up-and-down season, but because they were so good leading up into March Madness, it was easy for people to overlook those issues and say, oh, well, they should definitely go, to Elite Eight or Final Four. So I think sometimes when we set these expectations, we have to take a step back and really look into the whole season as a body of work and not just what we saw the last few weeks. Take the recency bias out of it. Everyone's
talking about Duke being the upset, being overrated. Let's talk about Villanova in the Big East. Everyone thought they were going to repeat. They got out too. So I think there's a lot of ACC, there's a lot of Duke haters out there.
Yeah, when you have some of the biggest programs in the country, programs like Duke and Syracuse and North Carolina, schools that people absolutely love to hate and root against passionately, even if they really don't have a dog in the fight, you're going to get that, oh, the conference is overrated, these guys are terrible. So I think that definitely does play a factor.